Excellent.
Awesome.
Right on.
Oh, turn that music back up a little bit. What happened to the music? Get to a different song. There it is. It was a little too loud there for a minute. We're here. I can't believe we're finally here. This is this is completely wild. It is completely wild. Oh my gosh. So, all right, before we get into the show proper, what time did both of you end up watching, or when did you end up watching the first run of the episode?
I watched it right at 9.
Right at 9? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Both
I
of them?
actually
Just do it right, just like back to back?
Oh, me? Yeah, I watched them back to back.
Nice. Ryan, how about you?
I watched them this morning. I woke up really early, and because I knew that I'd also have an opportunity to watch it kind of like normally there's a lot of kids that are running around my house, and so I knew that I could also watch this and then see if it's ready for my kids to watch it, and which I think to some extent it largely is. And so yeah, I watched it, and I watched the first episode, and I immediately followed it up with the second episode.
That's awesome.
How about you, Jeff?
So I got invited. This was kind of cool. Someone I follow on TikTok invited me, or put out like an invitation to mutual friends on TikTok to say, "Hey, listen, we're going to be doing the live stream on their Discord for their Patreon subscribers, and they're looking for people to come on and just be there live on camera, watching it all together, like a watch party." I'm like, yeah, I'm totally down for that. And at the last minute, everyone saw that it changed the time to 9, and they're like, no, we're not letting all of our subscribers know that we're changing this at the last minute, so we're still going to do 11:45. So I jumped on 11:45. I had Disney Plus up on one browser window, and then I had the Discord video stream up the other, and there was like 13 of us, I think, and they recorded it, we were all in video, and we watched the first episode, quick break, and then the second, but we're all like commenting and talking at the same time, and it was wild, the wave of emotions that was going through everybody watching, like visually, all of us like just responding differently to every scene that was happening. It was super cool. And then I proceeded to sleep until like 8 this morning because I was so damn tired. Hey, Robert, how you doing, man? Thanks for being here. All right, well, we are going to jump into the show and get started talking about Kenobi. Let's do this.
So exciting.
Oh, nope, it went into the wrong one. Sorry. Brendan's here. I promise Brendan's here. There we go. Awesome. Well, hey, guys, thanks for being here. And everyone who's watching, thank you for being here. Thank you for moving with us to Friday at noon to actually be able to do this show and talk about Kenobi, because we weren't going to do it at like midnight last night, obviously. So it's awesome. All three of us have had a chance to watch both of the first episodes at least once. I got through the first episode twice, or my second run this morning, but I was way too tired from last night to be able to get through the second episode, so I took a nap first. But we're here, and we're going to talk about Kenobi. That's what this whole show is dedicated to. It's going to be awesome. I see Robert's here with us and Walter's with us. Thank you both so much for being here. It's really awesome. Definitely, if you haven't had a chance to watch the show, throw it in the comments all along the way. Tell us how you felt, how these moments played out for you. But without further ado, I think we should get started. Rich. Of course, Rich is here too. Rich, of course, I promise, Ryan's going to have Trek references for you.
Rich is probably here to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds in the latest episode, which featured the Gorn, which was also really great, I might add. So yeah.
I mean, of course, because it's the Castle Chat, our Star Wars show that talks about Star Trek sometimes. That's what we do. Awesome. Brandon, thank you for being back on the show. Really appreciate it. I'm going to throw it to you first. Where would you like to start? Like, what's the thing that like just stood out to you before anything else or after everything else? What's the one thing that was just like stuck with you when you walked away from the 2 episodes?
I kind of want to say the directing. I think it's very immediately just blatantly obvious that this is being directed by someone new. And I think she did such an awesome job, and the whole tone, the whole vibe of it was very serious and kind of sad, especially, I won't go too deep into it yet, but like the beginning of episode 1, it's just like, man, like you get that real sense of dread from it. Like this is the darkest time for the galaxy. And like, not that The Mandalorian and Boba Fett do a bad job of that, but they feel a little more like popcorn movies. But it just felt like a dark and sad. And I loved that decision that like it set the tone right away what they were going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Brian, how about you?
I also want to applaud the direction. I thought that it was really well produced. So a thing that I don't like in a lot of television shows that have multi-episode story arcs is that you really get the sense that early episodes are used as almost like filler. Like, oh, we've got 9 hours we got to fill. So we're going to plant some really, kind of empty seeds. And I always think that if you're going to shoot like a 10-hour movie, like if you think of something like The Godfather, right? Godfather's 1 and 2 is like 6 hours. And in fact, I think AMC a long time ago broke up Godfather so that way you could watch all of it as like in chronological order over the course of like multiple days. And if you're going to have a long storytelling period, you should use that for character building scenes. And that is what we got. Any scene where Owen is in were my favorites. 100%. Every time Joel Edgerton is on screen, that guy does great. I liked seeing a lot of people that had appeared in the prequels. I loved that. I loved visiting. I loved the look of certain things. There's some points where I wish they would have went even further. But I also like how there was a subversion at some points around expectations that I had around who I thought villains were going to be, around how I thought this series was going to go. So I'm really happy with the look and the feel of how it is. I love that they're using all of this time that they have, because if this was a 2-hour movie, if this was like if we would have went and saw this Obi-Wan show as a movie, we would have gotten 15 minutes instead of 2 hours. And they used this 2 hours really well to build up characters and then to really give backstory, to let moments have a moment, to like let a moment land, and to let us learn more about some of these characters. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I take this as a lot of promise for where this series could go. Jeff, I'd love to hear it from you.
The two things that stood out to me the most were, one, Ewan McGregor is everybody in this show are phenomenal actors, all of them. We can tell that already. Ewan McGregor, though, playing Obi-Wan in this specifically, his ability to carry emotion and story through just his facial expressions alone. I mean, just even down to his eyes, but his facial expressions. You combine that with the score that was chosen to pair with it, and in some cases, the lack of music, like the distinct lack of music in certain or sound effect in specific settings. Those two things combined, like for the first half of the first episode, I was just in awe of the man. Didn't even need to say a whole lot for us to understand the conflict and the pain and the things that he has been struggling with for a decade to try to come to terms with, that when the Inquisitors show up, challenges it almost immediately. And it was so fascinating to watch that he is struggling with this. He's really practicing hard. He's really trying. You can see this in his face and then his body language and how he goes about everything. But the moment something comes up to challenge him, like his instincts just pop right back up again. He hasn't suppressed it so far that he can just ignore these things, which I loved. I absolutely loved that through both episodes, that we just, even when he is not talking, which is a lot of the time, you just know what he's feeling. You can, like, the emotions come across almost immediately. Like I felt myself feeling his emotions in those moments. I'm like, oh my God, I see his face. I'm like, I know what he's thinking right now. I get it. And oh my God, I can't even comprehend how hard it must be to feel like in that position right there.
Mm-hmm. The pain in his eyes through those first like 15 minutes is like, there didn't need to be any dialogue.
No.
Kind of bouncing off what you were saying. Like, I think one of my favorite scenes in the first episode is, it's super reminiscent of the book Kenobi by John Jackson Miller.
Yes.
It's the scene, he kind of gets off of work. He has to make that hard choice not to help that guy. And then he just goes back to this cave and kind of just sits down alone in silence and says nothing, and eats this meal and goes and sits outside and says nothing. But it's just like, just in his face, he's just so sad and so broken, and never has to say a word to get that across.
Yeah, absolutely.
His acting is phenomenal.
Yeah, the feeling that you could tell how much it was hurting him to not be able to help that person, or to try to, he wanted to stand up to that brute basically. And even you could tell, even though it wasn't I've pushed this all aside and I just go by and I ignore what's happening. He clearly cannot ignore what's happening around him. Like his response is the way he behaves in those moments, where he had to stand up to the foreman basically of the factory line cutting the Nibre Manta up, or the other, and I should do this right now. We're
getting into spoilers, everybody. Like, I mean, if you have not watched Kenobi yet, you should probably, pause.
I shouldn't even have said the phrases that I said. I apologize, everyone, for hopefully I didn't spoil that for anybody. But yeah, in that scene, like when he's going to stand up to that guy, you could tell that he is not. He is still not prepared, even after 10 years of being there. He's still not prepared to have to do those things because it's such a core part of the person that he is.
Yeah, I really think that the production value of how they did this too also came into play. Like I remember looking, there's a lot of really tight shots on Ewan McGregor's face, and I don't mean to get all the way into the weeds on something like this early in our review of this, but just to compliment like how this show is being produced is the makeup that's being used on him he just looks worn out. All I kept thinking about when I was looking at him was Clint Eastwood in the movie Unforgiven, where Clint Eastwood just looks William Money, that character just looks ragged, and he looks ragged and used up and worn out. And the line that he says about "I'm not the man I used to be." Or I think it could have been, "I'm not the Jedi I used to be," but I think it's I'm not the man I used to be. I just thought of how well that line wasn't said in the first 5 minutes. You spent 50 minutes with that character, and then that line was said. And I loved that because everything about this character is, I'm not the man I was when you saw me last.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I really like that. I really, really like that.
Totally agree with you. I don't know how deep we're getting into episode 1 already, but
go for it. No. We're probably gonna have to do this a couple of different times to really cover it. So
I was thinking the same thing.
They keep forcing him to make those hard choices. I'm pretty sure it's episode 1, but the young Jedi Knight, we're supposed to assume that he is. In my mind, like, I still have that instinct, like, well, come on, this is Obi-Wan. Of course he's going to help this guy. And to see this, just like, it's so hard for him. And you see that internal struggle just with those little shots of his face. And it's like, it probably takes everything in him to look at this poor kid and say, no, like, I'm sorry.
You got to go.
Else to talk to.
You got to go.
And it's like, we didn't need that line spoon fed to us before that of, oh, well, I'm different now. It's like that right there. It's like the Obi-Wan of 10 years ago, before all of this happened, would never even consider turning that down.
Nope.
Would never look away at one of his peers that are in need. And God, I thought that scene was super powerful. And there's barely any lines in it, really. He says like 3 things to the kid. He's, bury your lightsaber in the sand and get out of here. And that's pretty much it. But it's all just in the acting and the directing. The
response that he gives, we heard it in the trailers, but the response that he gives to the young Jedi, what about the fight? The fight is done. We lost. Mm-hmm. The resignation in his voice was, oh God, that broke my heart when I was watching it last time. I'm like, oh my God, like, I think what Padawan Clambake just put up there, the pain in his eyes left me with permanent goosebumps. Yes, it was. And Ryan, I loved what you described, because Ewan McGregor isn't quite as haggard looking as Ewan is, or as Obi-Wan is in the video. The makeup wasn't overdone. It was like enough to show you that he, like, the sand ages you, like being on that planet ages you, in addition to the things he's already having to deal with and cope with on a daily basis. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I really like something too that Brandon said, because there was what the darkest timeline kind of thing. This is when Obi-Wan is sitting there in his little hut, and he's telling Luke, like, oh yeah, the Jedi were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, before the dark times, before the Empire. And comic books, there's been an entire comic book series that have been dedicated to called the Dark Times. And you only get a sense of it. And I mean, yeah, they destroy the planet Alderaan and A New Hope. There's all of these terrible things that the Empire is doing, but to see the tyranny of the Empire, even in an outer rim planet like Tatooine, where you see, oh, it's so far away, as Luke says, to see it is really, it really just weighs on you. And this has been, for, I think, for us in the US, this has been a really hard week. And that opening of that first episode really hit me in a unique way because of that. And so I actually stopped watching that for just a moment, because it was just man, I'm sorry. I did not want to do this, but I'm going to go on it. So the whole episode to me felt very political for the moment, because it was about a man who feels helpless in the face of just great evil, and trying to hold on to what he's got. And I think that is kind of us as a nation right now, where we feel very helpless in the face of just reckless evil, and we can't seem to get alignment. And then there is hope in how this one character can take a risk of everything to save the life of one child. And again, I know that this series was shot well before the things that we're having to deal with here in this nation, but I would say that man, is this feel important for people to watch right now, that we as adults and people that have the ability to make a difference, to stand up, can and should do those things. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so yeah, that's my little political take for this, but I could not divorce what I was watching in this show. And I know that it was filmed before this, but things just happen the way that they do. And all I kept thinking was, and here this man finds redemption by saving the life of a child. So yeah.
Such a good point. That's such a good point, Ryan. And to that point, we get to see both sides of that sort of commentary. And again, I don't think it was even intentional, but that young Jedi Knight, we see exactly the kind of thing that can happen when you choose to do nothing. And sometimes doing nothing is just as evil as being the aggressor. And he gets to see that firsthand. A day or two later, we're left to believe. I mean, he walks into the town square and there's that poor kid hanging in the middle of the town square, which I thought was so dark. I didn't expect to see something like that.
I did not expect that. I did not expect that.
No, I fully expected him to be on a noose when we walked in. One of the other viewers I was watching was like reminded, there's a kid show, so it's not going to, well, not a kid show, but like it's not going to be that dark, but it was dark. It was enough. It was enough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that shot and that scene is a huge thing that pushed him towards making the decision to help bail, later on. It just, God, that was rough. That was terrible to see. I thought maybe that character would pop up again somewhere in the future or something. And even that really threw me off. And we're shown a couple of times that at least the third sister, Reva in particular, is brutal.
Yeah. And
there really is no option to stand and do nothing if you want change. And they show that in this episode really well.
It felt like, I agree with both of you. I'm so glad we're talking about this, because it's, good stories are relevant. Well, they don't have to be allegorical. They are hyper relevant to the world that we live in at any given moment. And it solidifies in our minds and our hearts these stories later on, 30 years from now. We're still going to be talking about this because we'll remember these two things coincided together, and how that made us feel differently than maybe if the incident this week in Texas hadn't happened. But something that was interesting to me about, even just as interesting to me about that situation, was in that first episode, there was so much that happened in just the first half hour of that show. And when this incident occurred that we're talking about, it was, to me, it felt like the first time he had to really physically and emotionally be connected to the result of the decision that he has made to stay out of it. Like, he knows what's going on in his mind. He knows it. He knows what he's doing, not helping somebody on the work line where he works and other places. He can kind of ignore it, just literally turn a blind eye. This is the first time, at least for me, I think, to me, it felt like Deborah, in her directing choice there, did it intentionally to make him have to physically confront and visually confront the reaction of his decision. Like, every action is going to have an equal and opposite reaction. This is the result of the decision you have made, Obi-Wan. And now you have to reckon with that and decide what your next path is going to be. You can continue to do what you're doing, or you can choose a different path. And I don't want to say I'm happy to see that it chose a different path, but it really sets in stone the person that he is now, but also compares that with the person he was in previous stories that we've seen him in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I really, one of the big worries that I had about this show, and I'll be totally honest, is I didn't know if I needed this show. I actually felt very comfortable seeing Obi-Wan as he's kind of, has his Harry Potter moment, leaves the little Luke behind, and then kind of wanders off into the desert. And then we see him pop up again later. But a thing that I've, in A New Hope, but a thing that I've always kind of stuck with is that if you're going to tell this story, you really have to tell the transition of someone who is, willing now to bet it all. I'm getting too old for this type of thing when he tells Luke that, and that he's trying to inspire Luke to go and make a big decision. And like I said, this episode was a lot darker than I thought it was going to be. And by the way, like, darker doesn't always mean better. The Justice League movies are very, very dark, with the exception of like Aquaman and Wonder Woman, but it's very dark, and that doesn't mean that it's better. But in this, I think you have to show what's at stake. And that's what I think they did well. If you're going to have essentially a Godfather-like length of time, two Godfathers length of time, use that time and set the stage. And I think they did a great job doing that in these first two episodes, in the first 2 hours, because you really get the sense of what's at stake. And you really get this buildup of this mountain of failure that Obi-Wan is kind of under, which again, spoilers on this, we can't say it enough. When Bail shows up in the cave, which I loved that. And by the way, I'm a big fan of Jimmy Smits. Seeing Jimmy Smits again was like a highlight for me in this episode. And so when Jimmy Smits shows up there and he says, you have to own up to your failure, but you don't have to be forever saddled by it. And here, the path to redemption starts with, with acts. And so I love that this then becomes a redemption story. I've compared this to like a lot of Old West things, but I see things in like Unforgiven, or as problematic of a movie as The Searchers is, The Searchers. Of someone who's having to come to terms with their own failure, their own anger, their own regret, and have to bottle that to be able to take a step forward. Yeah.
I really, what you were just saying, Ryan, I really appreciated that the show is taking this step, because we haven't really actually got to what the crux of this first part of the story is yet, but the thing I really appreciated is that they are not trying to, at least not yet, they're not trying to tackle Obi-Wan against the evil Empire. Like, it's not this simple, like, they're the bad guys, you're the good guy, let's go do some good stuff so the bad guys can't win. Like, that's not what they're trying to do. And I mean, maybe that'll change later on. We've only got a few, 4 episodes, or 4 more episodes to go. So we'll see. But I really appreciated that, because I would not have liked it if it was as simple as he was drawn to the call and he's going to try to fight the Inquisitors because that's the right thing to do. Like, no, that's way too simplistic, and it wouldn't. We can tell from this when we get to here in a moment what finally drew him off planet to go start really what this story is going to be about. Which you mentioned with Jimmy Smits. It is not about the big bad. It is about the little human thing that happened. Little is the wrong word, but the more personal and specific human thing that happened to somebody that he's connected to. And Ryan, the thing you just mentioned about what Jimmy Smits said, saying, you made mistakes, you have to own up to it. I love that interaction because he went beyond just simply saying you made mistakes. He's like, you made mistakes. We all made mistakes. He's like, you got to move past that. He was almost like in his face, but also sort of like dismissive at the same time of like, dude, you made mistakes, man. We made mistakes. Let it go. Like, you got to move on, man. You can't just sit on these things. They're just going to eat you up. So I really appreciated that.
I did too. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with that. I really like that. And I loved that they got to share a physical scene together versus being a holographic communication.
Me too.
That was shot as two people together in that cave. That also points to the desperation that Bale is in. It's like, no, yes. I'm going to come directly to you.
Yeah.
And I really liked, it wasn't the nicest conversation either.
No.
He gets a little lecture from Bale. Kind of like you said, Bale's like, essentially saying, hey, I get it, but you're having a pity party for yourself right now. You're telling me you have this responsibility to Luke. So what? That just means suddenly this other child in need doesn't matter? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And even then, Obi-Wan's like, you need to find somebody else. And as much as it's kind of him being stubborn and trying to stay with Luke, I don't think he thinks he can do it at this point. I think, we see how defeated he already feels, and he even in this point of grave danger for Leia, which, by the way, completely subverted my expectations. I don't know if it was in the trailers or not.
No,
I had no idea.
I had no clue.
In the show at all. So that already shocked me. But Bill's like, "Are you kidding me? This poor kid is kidnapped, and I can't help. And you're just going to tell me no?"
Yeah, and the other little kid is just sitting there on a moisture farm, hanging out, doing its thing, and you're. Yeah.
I loved the seriousness of the conversation, and also just seeing Bale again, like, seeing him come back to the universe was just so cool. But it was really powerful. It was awesome.
I couldn't agree with you more about the power of that scene. And again, like, I cannot say enough how great it is to see Jimmy Smits again. I liked him in episode 2, liked him in episode 3, liked him when he appeared in Rogue One. Spoilers for Rogue One. But the thing that I also liked the characterization of him as a father. And again, like, I don't know what it was about this episode. I'm not gonna lie, this has been a really rough week. But I just watching that scene where he's talking to Obi-Wan, and it's almost like I couldn't agree more with you, Brandon, because the thing that you said about Obi-Wan using Luke almost as an excuse, even Owen's telling him, like, we don't want you here. Hey, Owen, thanks for doing that. I didn't do that for you. I mean, all of those things that Owen is saying, Obi-Wan is using Luke almost like a crutch to stay out of things. And also, hey, I got my own problems. I got to look out for my own first. And I think that what Bale does is give a larger perspective, and this is his child. It's very different from Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan's is acting as a quote unquote protector, whereas Bale, this is a child that he's raising as his own. And the thing, and again, I loved all the father-daughter moments. That really rang true to me, because that's like legitimately conversations I've had with my kids. I mean, not like you're an Organa, but things like that. And the thing that really stuck with me, was that moment where he's basically like, hey, like, everybody's got their own. We're talking about something bigger. We're not just talking about my daughter. We're talking about something bigger. And she's just as important as the one that you're watching. And as a parent, I feel like all parents need to have that view, that we all need to recognize that, each of us love our children just as much as we all, it's like we're a network of compassion. And I love how that's how he draws Obi-Wan out of his reticence, is by saying, you have to be a person for others, not just a person for this one child. I really, again, I know that this was not written to be this way, but I feel like, man, that's like a clarion call for so many things right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. So yeah, we should probably mention that so anybody who watched it, you saw that Leia is the sort of the challenge to Obi-Wan at this moment, the thing that is going to get him off planet to go do something. And what we also learned is that the third sister, Reva, is the person who kicked this all off for us. And I love her. Moses Ingram she's doing an amazing job as this character.
Yep.
Something I found really interesting about her behavior when she is doing this and planning this and think of Kenobi, there's clearly some reason why she is fixated on Kenobi. I mean, when the fifth brother makes the comment about, we've been tracking him for 10 years and we've never found him, what makes you think you're going to do any differently here? That's a very interesting interaction. And it really got me thinking that I almost feel like, Brandon, I know I think you're probably a gamer. I don't really play a whole lot, but I haven't played Fallen Order, but I have watched like all the cutscenes and story from it, and she's kind of giving me sort of Trilla vibes a little bit. Like,
yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, like there's some reason why she is hyper fixated on him. It could be purely malicious. I have no idea, but I also wonder if it's a bit like you abandoned me sort of thing. I don't want to call to a trope as if she's just going to be a doting female who's looking for. I don't want it to be that, and I don't think they're going to do that. But it did give me the sort of Trilla vibes a little bit.
I agree with you. This is obviously speculation. We're only 2 episodes in. I feel like there may be a reason we saw that opening scene with the Padawans kind of having to escape the Order 66 on their own. I wonder almost if somehow Reva has a connection to that moment, and feeling like, Obi-Wan, you were supposed to be the one to stop all of this and you didn't. Like, we don't know what it is yet, but she clearly has some sort. This is personal. I feel, and I have to assume there's a reason we got that scene with those Padawans, because it was up to this point. There's no connection or context to why we got that, and I almost wonder if that might be something to do with her. Something
that goes beyond simply, hey, we're going to show you the temple scene just because you need to know some backstory. Like that, they wouldn't have played.
Order 66 happened. There has to be more of a reason than that.
Well, and to that point, to take it to the next level, they wouldn't have played such a long recap sort of thing at the very beginning, like a couple minute recap of all of the movies to this point before, to then also show the temple scene to just add on to that. Like that wasn't necessary at that point. It would have just been like layering on the cake. So I'm with you that there's some connection there that we haven't seen yet, or they haven't told us about yet.
Yeah, because I was immediately thinking that that's where we'd end up. Like, anytime you like see a child and then years later are supposed to pass, then you go into who is the next scene. I think they do a cut to Obi-Wan, but my first thought was those kids are like 8 or 10 years old, and then it's been 10 years, so now they'd be 20. And now we're seeing. All I kept thinking is when will we run into those kids? Like the call outs there were great. I really can't. I feel like, Jeff, you said something earlier, and Brandon, if you have the time, it'd be great to do another show where we actually go into like the depth of everything. Like, don't get me wrong, like this isn't I'm not going to say this is like an A+ delivery. Like there were definitely things that I had some issues that I would have liked to have maybe seen a little bit differently, but oh my gosh, there was so much depth at times. Could I do a special call out for what I think was Tamara Morrison?
Yes.
Like,
that was
wow.
That was so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
just unbelievable to see that. And gosh, I just felt like the richness and by the by, like there's a lot of things that you could say like that's fan service. This felt like it fit in the story. Every time there was a moment like that, every time there was a reference like that, it fit into the story. So yeah, I really found all of those things to not be like, oh, they're just throwing it in or they're shoehorning that in. It's great because it just added to the tapestry of the thing that we were watching.
Every single detail felt meaningful and important.
Yes.
And not just, oh, this would be cool. Like everything was spoken for a reason. And I loved that so much. There was another, it was, this one popped into my head because it was a minute maybe after the Tamara Morrison cameo. When Obi-Wan is looking for Leia, and that like young girl gives him spice. And she makes this and he's like, well, she's my daughter. I need to find her. And this girl goes, I used to be somebody's daughter too. And it's just little lines like that. It's like so deep, and there's so much
in
world
and twist
building,
and just
like this is a planet which, to my knowledge, we've never seen in live action before. I'm pretty sure we haven't. And little bits like that. It's like, look at this deep, rich world they're creating with these one-liners and these little cameos and all this stuff. Like nothing felt unimportant. Nothing felt like it was just thrown in to be cool.
Were you both getting? Were you both getting from? I think it was a guy called Dayu. I think it was the name of the planet. It was like Dayu or something like that. Yeah.
I can almost guarantee I know what you're going to say here.
It was like, as soon as they got down there, I was like, oh, this is like a mix between Blade Runner and Altered Carbon. Yeah. As soon as they landed, I'm like, oh my God.
I got that vibe. I got like a Japan kind of vibe almost.
Yes. Like manga come to life.
Yeah, totally. And I also got, I don't know if you guys or maybe anybody watching has played some of the older expanded universe games or anything, but it had like a real Nar Shaddaa vibe.
Oh yes, yeah, 100%.
Yes, totally, like a kind of a gangstery, casino-y, neon cyberpunk planet. Like it was just so alive, and it was awesome. Like that planet was so cool.
Yeah, it made me super happy to see that. And the scene you're calling out, Ryan, or sorry, Brandon, you called out about the girl offering the spice, and I'll just give this to you, and then she made that comment to him. What I loved about that moment, beyond the things you already said, just to kind of add on to that, was she did that, and then there was already a crowd of people there, and then she kind of like popped out of the crowd and then disappeared back into the crowd. And I thought it was very symbolic of the words she had just said, which is people come here and they never leave, and they're just. And then she disappears into a crowd again of multicolored dresses and outfits and all these types of things. You're like, she came out and then she was gone again. And it was like, wow, that was so powerful. And the other part of that particular planet that also stood out to me was specifically how they dressed. It was so interesting to see what felt like, again, like a Blade Runner, an Altered Carbon style dystopian type future, water dripping from various places and whatever else. Yet everybody, or a large portion of people, seemed to be dressed very nicely, which again gave off that sort of like gangster gambling sort of thing, where you see on the surface all these people look like they're having a great time, but there's really something kind of seedy that's happening that's obvious if you just look up a little bit. Like if you just look down and see the people, you can almost ignore it, but you look up just a little bit and immediately you get like what am I thinking? Not Coruscant. Why am I thinking blanking on Han Solo's?
Corellia,
like almost kind of Corellia kind of vibes at that point, where like just machinery and all these things that are made to work so that you don't have to look up. Just keep looking down and everything's fine. This is what we're here for.
And even though everything's kind of beautiful, in such a different environment, it's still tied really harshly back into this same theme they keep drilling in, it seems. Between her and the little boy who ends up taking him to the Jedi.
Oh God! Camille Nanjiani.
That was
awesome. Oh, man, that was great. I love that. I love that. Yeah,
it was so great.
Yeah, it was really good.
It keeps bringing back this urgency for Obi-Wan. I think involving like, oh man, I really do need to help Leia. Is that the galaxy does not care if you are a child. It is not kind to children. And this importance of him looking after this younger generation like keeps being kind of hammered in and through all these little subtle lines and all these ways. And it's like, Why is this kid working for a scam artist? Why is this girl selling drugs? Why is Leia being kidnapped as a pawn in this game? Like all of these things, it's like people need, like, it's all this stuff is showing Obi-Wan sort of that, like, we need people like you still.
No, that's what I mean. Like, I know that there's so much for us to talk about, and I don't want, I didn't intend to come in and bring this, talk about this, but man, I mean, what you just said, I think that's why it's like stuck with me, is that both of these episodes deal a lot with the vulnerability of our children. And I don't know if that was their intention, but it's every single episode, even that line of "I was somebody's daughter once," and again, like, you take away the style of this, which again, like, I loved the style of that planet. Like, I loved how it was reminding me very much of like Denis Villeneuve. But it seems like there is a thing they want to say about the responsibility we all have to children. And again, I could just be the times we live in are shaping my focus. But oh my gosh, it just kept coming up, and the fact that they kept bringing in more young actors, and even the plea of the young Jedi to Obi-Wan, looking for that type of protection, that type of help. And for, again, Obi-Wan, oh no, you're on your own, kid. We're all on our own. That is where, it was great to see that the heroic nature of what all of these characters could be is their ability to sacrifice themselves, or to risk, just not even sacrifice, just risk their own safety for the safety of others, and in this case for kids. And even the mother that's dealing with Kumail Nanjiani's character, again, I think that's where the dots maybe unconsciously kept getting connected for me, was how often we kept seeing that vulnerability, like, brought up again and again in these episodes.
Yeah. Which it was obviously so sad, but really beautiful that that kind of message can be so close to home in, this pretend universe. And it's like, I'm not a parent, and I can't even imagine how parents feel. Like, I really want to be one. But like, I used to be a teacher, and it's like, kids are especially here, like, somebody needs to be there to look out for him. And this Obi-Wan is learning in this show, like, this needs to be me. And I think the real benefit from the TV series format is, we get the movies, we get the films where it's like in the sequel trilogy, like, boom, Coruscant's gone. And we don't ever see these individual small people and these families and these little personal moments in the films. Not really. But something the show is doing so well, and the shows have done well in the past, is like, no, we're seeing like what this galaxy is doing to a 10-year-old. We're seeing what this galaxy is doing to this mom trying to protect her kids. And I love the way we're able to get these more personal, connected stories that like feel so much more at home than the films.
I completely agree. When we see like so like Star Wars Celebration's been going on this week, and several things dropped, like the Mandalorian Season 3 trailer, the Andor trailer. While I was watching the show, the first and second episode, it was what you're both saying. It was bringing back a lot of what I saw we've seen in Rogue One, and then saw in the Andor trailer, this very human side, like the real problems people deal with. That I really like that so far. Even though Obi-Wan had his lightsaber with him when he traveled, he never ignited it. I really appreciate that, because it reminds us that, the Space Wizard side of things, like, I love the Jedi and I love seeing all those components. The pieces that we saw in here were really good, and they were very well placed. But I really like that what we're still seeing right now is him sort of emulating a person who is not a Jedi, and what, to both of your points, what those people have to deal with every single day under a regime like they're having to deal with it. Like these Inquisitors showing up at your random home and intimidating or cutting your hand off just because you speak back to them, and just because they can, and no one's going to stop them. It to your point, Brandon, it really makes you think about this format, this style really makes you think about the individual people and what it would be like to have to deal with this. much because you don't have this benevolent group like we see in the High Republic, that some group is really just going to come in and really try to help save the day. There isn't anybody. Even if there is one or two, that they're not, they can make a tiny difference in a tiny corner of a huge galaxy. What do people do? How do they deal with the things? And I really appreciate that. That's, to your point, the format of a series rather than a movie allows the director like Deborah to explore that and to show us that, so we can connect with these characters in a much different way than we would in a movie.
Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
Oh, I don't want to interrupt you, Ryan. Go ahead.
Oh, no, man. I was just going to say that that's why I feel like a phrase that kept coming to me when I was watching this show was big things have small beginnings. And I thought about that like from like just the point of the show. And I know that I hate to say this because I was able to talk to Jeff and Brandon ahead of time, and I'm coming up to time here in my time on the episode. But big things have small beginnings. And man, if this wasn't a great small beginning for this series, but the message, the action and the message fit that too. That here Obi-Wan is going to have a small beginning on his road to redemption, but it's going to have a huge effect because of what happens to Leia down the road, what happens to Luke down the road. You know, I mean, it's big things have small beginnings, but the message here about how one person through a small action can start to make a difference, that a collection of small actions could make a big difference. And I really this is the show to watch right now. I think especially if you're based in the US, but anywhere in the world. But I think the message is great, but especially right now in the US, this is a show everybody should watch.
I agree.
Totally agree. 100%. And Ryan, did you say you needed a bounce, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm coming up to my time.
That's okay. Thanks for being here, buddy. We really appreciate it. Ryan and I will stick around for just a little bit longer. But definitely. Ryan, enjoy the rest of your day, man. Thanks for being here, and we'll catch up soon.
Excellent. Hey, thanks everybody, and looking forward to connecting next week. We can definitely go into more detail. But Jeff and Brandon, take it easy. And Rich, I will definitely work in some more Star Trek references in the future for the next episode. So
awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
Hey,
and Brandon, I'll switch over. It's just the two of us here in a sec. We'll do this and move Brandon over. There you are. Awesome.
Cool.
Excellent. Yeah. It's really cool. Like I'm glad that we have the guests in here too. Like I think there's just so much more we could break down about this first episode. There was a couple things I wanted to touch on before we kind of wrapped up for the day. Was some of the other nods, visually and storytelling wise, that I really appreciated. If we step away from the just for a little bit, take a break from the sort of the threads we've been pulling on a little bit here. Some of the things like around Obi-Wan and his cave, and like some of the action scenes, like how he made his food, how he sat down outside. Like there was a lot of Rey vibes there for me too.
Yes.
I don't know why that resonated so much with me, but there's something kind of like impactful for me to see. I mean, obviously this is happening long before Rey is even born, and like to see the context there. There's something about that really resonated with me.
I actually agree with you. Especially when he made his food, I was like, that's the Rey scene. Like that's exactly how she, but yeah, I see a lot of parallels there. And I've always weirdly, I don't know what the right way to word it is, but I've always compared Rey more to Obi-Wan than any other character. Like she reminds me of him a lot. But yeah, that visual, like you said, the visual storytelling with that was really good, and it was so reminiscent of like his living situation in the Kenobi the novel.
Yes,
and it's so weird how, honestly, a lot of the set pieces and characters are way different, but the themes they're touching on and the overall tone of it is really similar, and I love that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really, speaking of that, I really liked that they have him living in a cave, as opposed to that hut, or we will see him later on, and then also like in the Kenobi book as well. I really appreciate that. In the Kenobi book, he just basically, what we are led to believe is that he just finds this abandoned place and he's trying to set up shop, and he had just gotten there. But I really do like that they brought him to this place first, because now that I'm thinking about it, now that you brought that up, it makes me think that this is sort of reinforcing that even though he has told himself superficially that I'm okay with this. I'm ignoring everything. The cave sort of belies that, because if he had accepted everything, he would have already found a house. He would have already been established and lived in a house, and I'm resigned to this. This is what I have. But he hasn't done that. He's living, yes, he has a vaporator out front, and he's got a little security droid thing going on, but he's living in a very ephemeral way. There's nothing about that couldn't just easily be packed up in like 15 minutes and bounced on a skid outside of his EOP and left. And I think that's a really interesting visual reinforcement that he hasn't really come to terms with it. Even after 10 years, he has not come to terms with the fact that this is what he's doing. He's here and he's ready to be here for good. I think that really kind of forced that message into us, even if it was very subconscious.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And to that point, he tells that young Jedi, he goes, go back to the town and find a job and just set down roots there. He says something along those lines. But when he says that, in my head, I was like, but you haven't even done that.
Right.
Like it's almost like he's punishing himself, and he's not ready to accept that this is his life. And he's really not fully immersed into living as a local in this. I'm not sure if they ever name it, but this town in Tatooine, I guess it's probably on the outskirts of Mos Eisley or something. That's like a really good pickup. I did like on a slightly lighter note, I like in that scene, his little back and forth with the Jawa.
Oh,
because that was that whole opening was so dark and so sad, but I love that they threw the little Jawa in there.
Yeah, I did too.
And the little quips. And he's like, you're really going to rob me and then sell my stuff back to me, and you're not even going to clean it? And the Jawa's like, I charge extra for that. I loved, we at least got a little bit of the classic Star Wars humor mixed in there.
Yeah, I really did appreciate those moments of slight levity. Really were needed.
Yeah.
They were absolutely needed.
They were needed for sure.
Yeah, because it was a hard episode to watch. It really was. And the way that I was watching it last night, there was no way I could pause it because I was on a live with a bunch of other people. So I'm like, I had to we had a 5-minute break and then did the second episode, and it was. Even this morning when I rewatched the first episode, I got about halfway through and I had to stop and go make some breakfast and kind of walk away for a couple minutes, because it was just, there's just so much that is happening, so much emotion, so much that is carrying through, that it's very difficult to watch that and not take on a lot of it yourself while you're following him around.
Yeah, I totally did too. So, especially just, I don't want to harp on it too much, but just that whole vulnerability of the young people in the world, it just really, it was hard hitting.
It was a lot. Since we're kind of nearing the hour, and thanks everyone for being here, we really appreciate it. Let me see if I can flash this up real quick. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that because I think I'll ruin one of the video streams. That's okay. I was going to flash up subs. If you haven't subscribed already, we'd love you to do that. We're going to be doing another one of these probably next week, next couple of episodes. Usually we do this every episode after a release like this, and we just do a review for the first half hour or something in our shows. Today was special because we wanted more people to be able to join us, and we wanted to be able to watch the show last night and not be up too late and all that fun stuff. But one little bit of, I'm just gonna be kind of a smart ass for a minute. Was it just me? Was Flea really creepy in this?
Yeah.
Do you know? Yeah. I mean, hopefully everybody out there watching knows what I'm talking about. That Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers was the guy who basically kidnapped Leia.
I can't remember his name. It started with a V. I can't.
Oh yeah, something Vedek or VTech or something.
Something weird.
Yeah. I had the closed captioning on my browser, and I saw that. I was like, oh my god, he is so creepy. He is so creepy.
Dude, right the first time he popped up on screen, I didn't recognize him. But I was like, oh my god, this dude's terrifying looking. He's awful. I think he's dead now.
Yeah. When we all watched, all the people that were watching the stream at the same time, everyone, half the people at once were like, wait, is that Flea? Other people were like, wait, who? We're like, my god, that is.
Yeah, but he was creepy.
He did that role so well. And I really did love that when he's on his ship and that one of his crew says, wait, we're kidnapping children now? What's this all about? And Flea just looks at him and says, let's just get this done. With a very he doesn't care. But then when he switches back to the holo table, he hesitates for a second before he actually hits the button to bring up the holo of Riva. And I was like, oh, I like that. Even that subtle nuance to this one character is no, he doesn't give a crap. Oh, yeah, maybe he does. Maybe not about the kids, but he is definitely worried about the people that he's working for.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that too. And I don't know if I liked it or not. I think I did, but I thought it was notable that Obi-Wan does not kill those guys. You know, like you mentioned, he never pulls out his lightsaber, and I like that Obi-Wan is really trying to avoid senseless death,
Mm-hmm.
which he's seeing so much of. And even though those guys kidnapped a child, they never hurt her.
That's true. That's very true.
And he spares them. He just basically drugs them to the point of, they're not coherent anymore. But he does not really hurt them very badly. And I kind of
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
I wonder if that's because they didn't hurt Leia. Like, she's fine, and so I'm wondering if he took note of that, and that's why he didn't kill them or something.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that, but that's a good point. Yeah, he avoids the senseless death, like, because that's just not the person he is, and it really does reinforce the comments the Grand Inquisitor makes near the very beginning about it's like an itch the Jedi can't need to scratch. Like they just have to follow their code. Like they can't help it. They can't stop themselves. And then to see him do that, I think really reinforces that even after this many years of trying to avoid it, he can't stop himself from doing this. Like he knows that he's constantly drawn to this.
He's still kind of doing the right thing. I think he maybe kills one person in it. I think with a blaster. I think somebody's like super about to like really hurt her, and I think he shoots them, but he really doesn't kill anybody, and he never pulls out his lightsaber, and it's always always in the back of his mind to do the right thing above doing the easy thing. Even though it takes Bale to like give him a parental lecture to get him back to that point,
which is awesome. Like that scene was so fantastic. It really was.
Yeah,
that was exactly I think what we needed.
One other thing I think that you might agree with me on is what about the young actress playing Leia?
Oh my God.
Dude,
cast so amazingly well.
She looks just like I would imagine Carrie Fisher would have looked. And this little girl just nails her lines. She has this like air of confidence about her. Like the whole time, I was just amazed that she's even in the show. Like the whole time, I'm like, how was this not out? Like, how did people not talk about this before the show? So the fact that she and their beautiful depiction of like Alderaan was even in the show, like I was so excited about it. But God, that little girl did such a great job.
She did so amazing. I'm totally with you. Like she was cast beautifully, and I loved what I really loved about how she played Leia at the age that she's at is in the scene where she confronts her cousin, and she just demolishes him with like verbal sparring. It was beautiful. But then immediately after, when her parents are, telling her like, yeah, I get it, but you also can't be a dick. Like, they're like, they can't throw. Her response to them is like, but he was being mean, and I really appreciate that. Not because she responded like you would think a 10-year-old typically would respond, or a kid of that age would respond. But I liked that while she is learning from her parents how to do that verbal sparring, how to see the world, and how to carry herself, she is still a kid, and I really liked that. Those two things happening back to back to each other, because it reinforces that in those moments she's dressed a certain way and she's acting a certain way and she's behaving this way. She's great at it, but she's still a kid, and she's still going to behave like a kid because she's a kid. And I love that because it reinforces the humanity that both you and Ryan brought up about why Obi-Wan has to do this when Bail confronts him, because no matter how strong she may be, she is still a child.
She's still a little girl, and she's still vulnerable. And I love another like very like, oh yeah, she's a 10-year-old is when Brea finds her, after she's in the woods, like in the beginning. And then Leia's like, oh mom, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. I realized my actions were wrong. And she gives her mom a hug and then steals her droid out of her back pocket. And I was like, this is great.
And the mom's like, I can feel that, right?
Yeah. Like I love that, like, this little 10-year-old Leia is already sort of a little rebel. She's already like, no, I'm going to stand up to this person who's being mean. I'm going to tell off this dude who's being oppressive. Like, I'm not letting people walk all over me. And she's 10 years old. And we see it again. She's kind of, poking at Obi-Wan when they're, kind of on the run. and she said something, and she's like, "Well, you're not a very good." And he goes, "Wait a second, how old are you?" And like he knows how old she is, but still, he's like, "How old are you again?" And I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I was just blown away by her, and I just looked up her name, so her name is Vivian Lyra Blair.
Well, Vivian, if you're out there, you are amazing. You crushed the lines. You not just the lines, like the portrayal of Leia. Like watching the episode, I'm 100% convinced. I'm like, this is Leia. Like that is Leia right there. Like, yeah, done. You have cast Leia as a kid. Like I am totally sold on it, 100%.
Yeah, and there's a great book, and they're doing it. If they're turning it into a manga series right now as well. But Leia, Princess of Alderaan, written by I have that on my
try
desk.
not to throw it around.
Yep. I
There's
just
number
bought
2
that yesterday.
Yep, I have number 1 floating around here someplace.
Yeah, she's like, I want to say 14 in that.
I think so. Yeah,
something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
You can totally see like this 10-year-old Leia and 14-year-old Leia and where they connect, and it's like it's just seamless. Like I don't know, that was such a cool element of the show, and by far the biggest surprise for me.
100%. I was completely caught off guard that we were getting her. Actually, when it went to that planet, when it went to Alderaan, I didn't realize that's what it was. I was like, okay, we're going to some cool planet. This kind of looked like the capital from the Hunger Games. Okay, where are we at? Yeah. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, we're on Alderaan. I'm like, wait, we're getting Leia? Holy crap. Well, listen, I know it's 1:00, so we've been at it for a little bit. We got so much more we could keep saying, so we'll probably pause. But to your point, for anybody watching, this is book 2. I have book 1 over in the corner, but if you haven't picked these up, the manga here, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, this series is amazing. It's really well written. It's drawn beautifully. And it just tells this one particular chapter of kind of her life, or a series of little chapters of her life. It's really good. It kind of, I appreciate it in the same way that I'm appreciating, well, I only have book 1 yet, but of the new Obi-Wan comics that came out, how it's like we get him, he's old, he's sitting in his hut, but he's writing his journal, and then we get snippets of his life when he was younger. I only have the first issue so far, but I really like that take, because what we get to do is see snippets of these characters that we haven't seen before, but really help us understand who the character really is. And we don't need them to be very long stories. They can just be bits and pieces, but they're enough to say, here's one more element of who Leia is, or Obi-Wan, or whoever we're talking about.
They're doing a great job of releasing projects like with perfect timing to connect the dots, so we can see how 10-year-old Leia is this 14-year-old versus the 16-year-old we see in the comic versus, Obi-Wan and his journey. And it's like really, really well done. So like Jeff said, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the comic series, definitely check them out if you're watching the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next week, as always, on our regular scheduled time, Thursday at 9 p.m. Pacific time. Probably talk a lot more about Obi-Wan because we got 2 episodes this week. And then each week after that, while the show's running, we'll probably do half hour, 40 minutes or so about Obi-Wan, and then touch on some other things too. But Brandon, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you having me back, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
absolutely.
I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.